Hello and welcome to another episode of Thoughts on Talks. Reverend Mike McMorrow, myself, Malayna, and our return guest, Salaam Thompson. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
And
Thank you.
of course. So we are here to talk about the Sunday talk, which was July 5th, and it was called Free at Last in honor of July 4th. And the theme for the month of July is Unchained Spirituality. And again, Reverend Mike, I think you pointed out at the beginning of the talk that these topics were scheduled last year sometime. And they had no way of knowing what would be happening in the world today a year later after they chose it. So it's interesting. So freedom, what a topic, and all the meanings it has in today's world. Not only with the Black Lives Matter movement, but also the way that people are interpreting freedom as a reason to wear a mask or not during a pandemic, which I find very interesting. Rev, you look like you were about to say something. Did you stop yourself?
I have nothing to say on that subject. Nothing constructive to say.
Okay. But it is interesting how it seems like the word freedom should mean the same thing to everybody. Mm-hmm. And yet it really doesn't. And so, as with anything in the English language, we have to unpack it. That helps, yes. But still, there are 4 or 5 definitions for a single word, and they can be so different. I posted a video earlier today on my Facebook of the Stanford Talisman, I think is the name of their choir, singing "Lift Every Voice and Sing."
Yes.
And at the beginning, there was an intro. And a woman read the definition of freedom and then said, none of us are free until we're all free. And I'm getting chills saying that again, because I believe that, and I don't know why everybody wouldn't, but it seems like they might not. And that's why we're here.
They think they already are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Or they think they already are casting the provision of freedom already in their own myopic view.
Right. And that only they deserve it, maybe, and that other people don't?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem.
I think that's a small portion of folks. I think they're just kind of clueless, to be honest with you. I mean, they can't be now with the, because the conversation has really been amped up, certainly the last few months.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to careen the conversation off
at
the beginning.
Some people
they have Salaam here.
Some people hold on to their myopic view because it feels safe.
Yeah.
Stepping beyond that comfort zone is scary. But I think we're in a time where we want to encourage people to step into that discomfort, because we all need to get past it. I think everybody's so sensitive, and we can't have a conversation and make a connection and make change unless we're willing to be a little uncomfortable through it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and there's the potential to really build something really wonderful together that's far better than anything that we've had before, and but we have to we got to slog through it in order to get there. And and that's kind of why we're doing this thing.
Yeah.
On Zoom. It's our own little way to address it, knowing that as it gets posted, it does go to the potential to go to a much broader audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I remember last week, Reverend Mike, you mentioned a woman who had said, and I'm diving right in, so prepare
Okay.
yourself. A woman who had said, it's a good thing we're not looking for revenge. We're only asking for equality. We're not looking for revenge. And I believe her name's Kimberly Jones. I saw her in an interview on with Trevor Noah for The Daily
Mm-hmm.
Show. And it was really interesting, the way she expressed in that video of just anger was very authentic in the moment. She's actually an author and has written a book and could explain it in a more conversational tone with Trevor Noah anyway. And so my initial reaction when you told me about it was like, oh my gosh, who said that? And like, I wasn't even clear who said it, what color they were. Just the word revenge was like,
Mm-hmm.
I had a response to it. So I looked more into it because I wanted to explore that feeling that came up. And it is good. I mean, equality is good for all of us.
it's interesting because when I saw that initially, my reaction to it was more hopeful than anything else. Because I thought I just kind of went, oh, she's right. And I almost said that yesterday when I was doing just that brief timeline, right? To where I said, I'm surprised that Black folk even want to talk to us anymore, right?
Yeah.
And instead, I said, and they consider themselves Americans, which I think is a very important point to make in the context of particularly a July 4th talk that was focused on the Declaration of Independence. Because well, just the folks that I've been talking to, just even the term African American, Reverend Nancy, she goes, no, I think of myself as American. I don't really connect to African outside of centuries ago.
Sure.
What she connects to is her Americanness. And I don't know, there was something very patriotic about that. And I think that's part of the conversation that just speaking to America and the fact that it was July 4th, I don't know that. So yeah, there are these things that have been systemic problems within our in the world that we've created. Well, that white folks have created. Because if we're honest about it, it really has not been a co-creative experience, right? It's like, well, we can tolerate this much.
Well, it's a negotiation, maybe more than a co-creation. Like D.L. Hughley, the comedian and author, had said, when people chant "Go home," he says, "Well, I don't remember us being invited anywhere. You brought us here." So those are, really obvious, kind of simple points that have to keep being made because people don't look at the history. And I watched Hamilton over the weekend, the musical, and it's in there as they were creating this new nation. The question of slavery was part of the conversation and got pushed aside in that negotiation and who won the argument. So, Salaam, what are the thoughts popping up for you as we?
Well, just jumping right in, like the idea of, well, let's start off with a quote from Malcolm X, where he said, just because a cat has kittens in the oven, that doesn't mean they're born biscuits. And the idea of, African and American. Personally, I choose Black because I think it's all encompassing, and the only thing that separates Black Americans from Haitians is, for example, is just a boat stop. I mean, so just as like there are no more Haitians is no more French than I am English. You know what I'm saying? And there are Black Panamanians, there are Black Mexicans that are very seldom talked about. It's actually eschewed, from getting that information from getting any kind of light of day. And but Africa, from what I know, was named after one of the Roman officers, Scipio Africanus, after he conquered Carthage for the second time after Hannibal had pulled up a quick one, on Rome prior to the Roman Empire really setting the hole. So we really, to the Nancy's point, I get it that she's talking about patriotism, but I tie it to the fact that we were born here. So we were born here, yes, but in what state were we born here? Okay, we were born here without a tongue, without a native tongue, without any language, without any customs, without our historical umbilical cords just cut, and so we have no connection. I mean, like you can think of there's a basketball player, Patrick Ewing, right? But there's a fictional oil tycoon, J.R. Ewing. Okay, one is Black, one is white. One had to make it to the NBA. The other one had the Ewing oil industries passed down to him. For those of you who are Dallas fans out there, so my wife and I, we're going back watching, we're on season 7 now, I should say, but neither of those two individuals look alike. You have, let's say, Anthony Davis, who plays for the Lakers. Okay, you have Jefferson Davis, who was the head of the Confederacy. Okay, one is Black, one is white. They don't look alike. So that's the legacy, the long-standing legacy of what slavery is, and it's a proof that we don't belong anywhere. So if you look at, let's say, Staples Center, or formerly in the city of Chicago, we had the Sears Tower, now it's called the Willis Tower, or you have different naming rights of all these arenas, okay? So they had to pay for those naming rights, okay? We're wearing the name of our slave master, but nobody ain't paid us nothing. You follow what I'm saying? So like that's part and parcel of this reparation package. What it also does by putting a name on there, like if I wish I had my basketball or a pair of Air Jordan sneakers or Kobe's, from God rest his soul, but you'll see their signature on their shoe. The signature implies ownership. Okay, so us wearing the slave master's name, okay, like on our birth certificate, it still, even though we're free, it still implies that they still own us. We're still owned, so hence when you have movements by, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Noble Drew Ali, Marcus Garvey, who sought to like create, a element of, Pan-Africanism, or Black nationalism, if you will, in the effort to recapture what was once lost. There was an interview in '63. You probably find this on YouTube where I forget the white man's name, but he kept grilling Malcolm X, asking him, "Can you tell me what your father's name was?" And Malcolm kept pushing back, saying, "My father didn't know his name." That's why he uses X, because X in mathematics means the unknown. And so that white man just would not accept the fact that he did not have a last name that was a direct linkage, to his ancestry and not Malcolm's. So here, when you have that kind of foundation laid, as far as identification, it muddies the waters as far as, okay, who you are, how you identify, because our identification started from a Negro, a so-called Negro. Negro, when you look at the etymology of it, means one who is spiritually dead. And in order for us to be spiritually killed, essentially through our seasoning, on the slave plantations, we had to be stripped down and culled away and remade in the white man's image. Yeah, so just like if you were to take any garment of clothing out of that double door closet that's right behind you, Malayna, and you look on the back and you see like what country it's made from. I mean, when you take any black man and woman and child in the United States of America and look on the back of their shirt, they'll say "Made in America." That's we're essentially a byproduct of those horrors.
Yeah.
When I look at how bringing it to the element of freedom, if you will, and how many attempts at this freedom was made. I was thinking about this earlier, and I think about how many times we try to take this element of freedom for Black people, and each time when it gains steam, like gestationally, and when it started attaining stage after stage after stage, to a point where somewhere in the midst of that, something happens in society that rolls things back and ends up aborting that growth. So we've had it. Look, I heard Roland Martin earlier today. He cited this is the third Reconstruction period. The first one was between 1865 and 1877. The second one was between 1954 and 1968. And now we're in the midst of a third one. So here we're going to try this again. We're going to try and conceive freedom. We're going to try to conceive, I hate to use the equality, but equity, because the example I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, as far as who's in need, in dire need of immediate repair and residual repair and quantifiably elevated repair compared to those who are around them, basically. So just looking at through that lens, we're trying to, develop this embryo, and we always keep, once we get to full term, I don't even think we've gotten to full term. And at least through these lenses and through other lenses across nearly 330 million Americans, we have a different interpretation of what full term actually means. And through these lenses, these Black lenses here, we keep aborting that baby. I mean, and Roe versus Wade was 47 years ago. So how many times we've been aborting it for years prior and years since. And so, like the old saying goes, no matter where you look, there you are. And here we are.
Yeah. It's even from just that bit that you just said, it points out so many elements, and that's not even all the elements that are involved in fixing where we are now to get to that equity and get to the place where we're treating each other as equals with equal respect and giving everybody an equal chance, opportunities, justice. I mean, it's such a many-pronged thing. And it is hard to know where to start and what each of us can do. I know during the Sunday talk, Reverend Mike talked about Reverend Howard Thurman and social justice. Should I share maybe one of the?
Sure, please.
Let's see. I'll start sharing because it's some nice graphics too. So there's the theme Unchained Spirituality, which, we're talking about a society that was really built on slavery. So the word unchained has real resonance. And I'm not sure that they intended that when they created it. The talk theme, let's see, I maybe have to enable it. There we go. Shared window is closed. What happened? Oh, these good ideas that technology gets in the way of. Okay, good. The next slide. There we go. Free at last.
Oh, I sent you the wrong one. That's from Dr. King, but you're welcome to share that one.
Okay.
So that's not what you shared yesterday? So see,
No.
people get another look into the behind the scenes and putting a Sunday Talkins like.
Yeah, I totally went a different direction because, not that Dr. King isn't significant, but I liked what Reverend Howard Thurman had to say about this, and so while you guys, why don't you talk about that, and I'll pull up the correct one.
Okay.
Okay, well, this is to that theme of freedom. And I think when Dr. King was talking about it, he was trying to give people a vision to work toward. It was like affirming it in the present tense, but knowing that we haven't quite reached it yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop the screen share.
So I wonder what a young kid in Chicago, when he was learning these things about Dr. King, I wonder how they hit that young fella in Chicago growing up, or did it?
Oh, for myself, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, first, I haven't done this formally, but I will apologize to Dr. King. And the reason why I'm apologizing to him because I, like many of my classmates, we were taught a watered down, sanitized representation of his story. Because too often when he was alive, there was the choices were put in front of us. Okay, are you down with Malcolm? Or are you down with Martin? Or are you down with the Panthers or SNCC or what have you? Then SNCC and the Panthers kind of follow along the lead of Malcolm. And if you remember, Kwame Ture, who was formerly Stokely Carmichael, was, with Martin at one point, he became a Panther. But I say all that to say that coming up and, Martin, I knew about him. I knew like the baseline, high level story about him. But we were taught, the March on Washington, the bus boycott and things like that, the letter from Birmingham jail even. But I wish that in my schooling that the significance of the letter from the Birmingham jail was even drilled into and really explored, because that's so applicable. He wrote it in 1957 and it's still applicable here in 2020.
Right.
And but going forward, Martin was in the South, and then he moved, to Chicago, moved into Gage Park. He marched into Marquette Park, for equal housing, in Chicago. And even when I've taken my kids to Chicago, and I would drive through the route, this is where Martin Luther King was when they threw a brick upside his head, and when he was marching for equal housing. And the significance of Martin being struck by that brick there is it wasn't military police who did it. It wasn't Chicago Police Department who did it. It wasn't FBI personnel who did it. It wasn't the Central Intelligence Agency who did it. It wasn't the Ku Klux Klan or the skinheads of that day who did it. These were ordinary white folks who came out of their home and lined the streets when they were aware of him marching through their neighborhood. They threw the bricks. Now, those white folks who lie in their homes and yell all kinds of nigger epithets and this, that, and the other, these folks have children, grandchildren, going to have great-grandchildren. They've married. They've traded in. Obviously, the sheets weren't worn when you look at the footage from 1966 when he made that march, but they can blend in and hidden in plain sight, to this very day. So it just goes to show you that it's not like we equate racism with you have to be in a hate group or you have to be like express hatred for a Black person. But it's really beyond that. A lot of times you've seen it like where this awakening where you see where now the folks are saying white silence is violence. And the interesting thing, I see a lot of white people holding that sign up. 4 years ago when out in Sterling and Philando Castile were killed, and that was uttered by black social media warriors or what have you, and they're thumb wrestling on their phones, getting a post up. It would kind of like was oversighted by a lot of the same folks, but now everyone doesn't have anything to do. The country's on lockdown, less distractions, so you had no choice but to look at a glaring reflection at you as a society. But as I grew older, the deeper dives I did into Martin's life, particularly those last 3 years, the last 3 years of his life was so much. I mean, like, you wouldn't hear, like, his daughter said that the very last sermon that he was preparing before he was assassinated, it said that America was going to hell. But the CNN specials didn't air that. This came right out of Bernice King's mouth. And Harry Belafonte, if you talk to him, he's in his 80s now. He was an actor, but a seasoned actor. But he said that Martin told him that I feel that I'm integrating my people into a burning house. That's an antithesis of what he wrote in '63 in the March on Washington.
Right.
And that's the antithesis of the Nobel Peace Prize that he won the year after that March on Washington. So these are things about Martin that are suppressed and not learned or explored, rather, I should say. And it kind of gives a dishonest portrayal, if you would, of what he truly represented. And I'm speaking to, like the government of our country right now. It was in as much as they signed off on him to have a holiday and to have a monument erected of him in Washington, D.C., not far from there at the Pentagon, they were plotting his murder and his assassination. And his family won a settlement. I think the settlement was only like $1 because it wasn't about the money for Coretta Scott King. God rest her soul. It was to expose the conspiracy behind the government's plotting his assassination.
Right.
So just finding out all these things as I grew older, I'm looking at the education that I received with the side eye. I'm looking at all the misrepresentation and the pictorial representations of Martin with the side eye. Or I'm looking at folks who are saying why are you all protesting? If Martin was here, he wouldn't protest. He'd be in peace or wherever. You haven't studied the speeches in his last 3 years of his life. I'll tell you a whole nother song.
He was just getting warmed up.
Oh yeah.
Speaking to what you're talking to, he was getting ready to tackle the corruption of the system itself, capitalism, the way it was built, and to use Bernie's language, how the game was rigged. And yes, and also the Vietnam War. He was out. So I remember as a kid hearing the adults in the room talking about Martin being a communist, being afraid he was a communist. But that's Stephanie and I were also watching that Netflix special 13th. That's an eye opener. As a guy who kind of grew through, I was a young adult as all that stuff unfolded, as they're connecting all the dots. Well, it just gets you angry to see, and of course they're showing the incarceration rates. So the thing that's interesting, the reason why I bring that up is one of the points that they are making in the film is how a whole generation of leadership within the Black community has been basically just removed in whatever way.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be the other interesting component.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry about that. Did you capture I'll let you finish. Did you capture the language when they zeroed in on the 13th Amendment? And did you capture the coded language that they made in there?
Yeah,
about
that
started
prisoners.
the peonage and so forth? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
because
so subtle, and we never caught that subtlety when we were taught all the amendments in school and things like that. So
well, and just the criminalization
mm-hmm.
of the young black male,
Yes.
and how many were captured to rebuild the South. And this is the idea, of course, and I think this is the writer, I'm not sure how to pronounce his first name, but Coates is his last name.
Mm-hmm.
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
How do you say it?
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yes. So
yeah.
he's the one who I'm aware of was talking about how
He's a sharp brother.
that, yes, the down payment for the United States was built on the backs of slaves,
Mm-hmm.
and continued to be even through Reconstruction. So when it comes to, I think these things are helpful because the reparations argument, which I think is where you were kind of speaking to,
Yes.
is will get difficult when it actually comes down to dollars and cents. Just as it has, all we have to do is watch the way the stupidity around healthcare, that whole conversation has come down.
Mm-hmm.
About who deserves it and who doesn't, and so on
Yes.
and so forth. So I think it's important that we have these films like 13th, that we have writers like Coates and Menachem, and even Angela Davis was in the film, right?
Absolutely, she was. Yeah.
I mean, really, really smart people. And, she's probably tired now, but her, it's like the moment is here, and finding those voices, or
mm-hmm.
even Malcolm's when he stepped away from violence, or even Carmichael. We got so freaked out about the Black Panthers, but there were some sharp operators there too who were speaking truth to power, but we couldn't. White America, white leadership, and the population too, we were scared shitless.
Yeah.
Right?
But I don't think Malcolm
that
stepped away from violence. I think he stepped away from dysfunction, but I don't think he stepped away from violence necessarily. It was interpreted as violence by white America, because in white America's minds, the so-called Negro is not supposed to be self-empowering. The so-called
right.
Negro is not supposed to be take up self-defense against their aggression. And
Right.
the so-called Negro must always be in reverence and deferral, to white America. So when you had Malcolm, through his teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, come forward and give a new philosophy to Black people that has lasted years after they passed,
Right.
They, even up to the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan. To where you see in hip hop, the hip hop gets demonized today, but no one touches the hip hop from 86 to 93 or so. That's what we call the golden age of hip hop, where you saw pictures of Malcolm, pictures of Elijah, pictures of Mr. Farrakhan in the rap lyrics. And that, for me, coming up in the inner city, in the ghetto, in the hood, I mean, that was a ray of hope for any of us, to grow up and how to this is what they're saying. So this is how we can get down. This is how we can reform and re-educate ourselves. This is how we can kind of break away from this paradigm and establish a right and exact code of conduct for your family going forward and for yourself. So I think so in that respect, I think they looked at that earlier pushing back against a white mindset, by Malcolm, as an act of violence, because frankly, white folks are comfortable as long as we're singing and dancing and entertaining them, and boxing and beating each other's brains out, in the ring. But once we say, well, wait a minute, I have a brain too. I can fire off neurons in my mind too, just like they can.
Right.
So
take a knee.
we're capable of self-mastery, contrary to what their popular belief is. So when we take on those, it's like, now wait a minute, nigga, you're getting too big for your britches, and then here come the whip. You see what I mean? And that's an element of, and you see that patriarchal element of white supremacy still come to the forefront, even with a smile, even with someone who they consider you a bosom buddy or let you in the inner circle. That element is still there. Right. You see, so just to clarify. But go ahead.
So it sounds like you are skeptically optimistic about the moment.
Oh, absolutely, because we've been here before.
With a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah, because like we've like I mentioned earlier, we've aborted that baby that was growing into freedom,
right.
So many times that like, okay, like we're wondering if, we can't even get it to the point where the baby has SIDS because the baby ain't born. And every time the baby is on the verge of being born, colloquially speaking, we do something in our society to retard its growth or kill it altogether. And right. That's what my concern is. It gives me pause. Maybe it's me getting older. I'll be 45 this year. So that's the one bit of empirical evidence I have that I've been Black for 45 years in America. So it's kind of like, you kind of seen the same syndicated show play, it's shown up differently, and it looks like it's greater signs today, but I'm still kind of skeptical. Even looking, I've seen the protests. They were protesting in LA when I saw down in Venice actually yesterday, but they're not getting as much attention now. Because right. Things are starting to die down. They're trying to rush sports back, and once they rush sports back, the folks are going to start getting distracted again. And then you have folks that we're taking down monuments, which I understand, but we haven't dismantled structures. Meanwhile, the officers who shot Breonna Taylor are still walking around. Right. Only thing they did is lost a job and they can file for unemployment, but yet they're still walking around, not criminally charged.
Right.
That's an inherent problem.
Yeah, that's.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to do. Let me just, from my naivete, the happy little bubble that I lived in when I learned about Martin Luther King Jr. in school, was I'm so glad they got that racism stuff taken care of, and now we're all good now. And I think part of that is because my father is dark skinned. He's from Sri Lanka, but he's dark skinned. So in my family, we had all colors, and no matter what skin color people are, they're family. So I thought it was sorted out by the time I learned about Martin Luther King. So everything since then has been a rude awakening of like, oh my God, this is the world I'm living in. Yeah. And it's still continuing, because as much as I thought I knew history and understood situations, there's always more that I didn't know, and that still shocks me. And that's part of the discomfort that I want to help learn so that I could share with other people and help bring us all to this awareness that there's a lot to fix.
It's a lot. We can't put up one piece of drywall and say, ta-da, the house is built. You know what I'm saying? So, and a lot of times, even talking to other people, that's what they feel. Okay, we put the piece of drywall. Hooray! Habitat for Humanity works. No, that's not how it works. This is just the drywall. You didn't put the insulation. You didn't put the beams. You didn't put the beam sensor to understand, okay, where you're going to hang something up. Put the plaster. All that stuff is still one leg of the race. That's all. As long as we treat it like it's a journey, and I think the more we treat it like a journey, the more that those activities along that journey are inculcated in one's habits. And so it gets to the point where you're not even thinking about how far you got to go. You're just going. And once you're just going, your body just is muscle memory at that point,
Yeah, and that's what Resmaa Menakem is talking about in My Grandmother's Hands, is the muscle memory. That within our bodies, our body reacts before our brain does. And so if there's trauma that we're reacting to that isn't even from us, but is from a parent or a grandparent who taught it to us or who handed it down in our genes,
right. Well,
we're going to react from that.
the thing that I find hopeful and helpful about that, his take on this conversation is that, and this is why I'm kind of promoting this book also, is because people can delve into this, including police, because he talks about blue bodies also. That they can explore this stuff without fixing blame, but rather identifying trauma and then recognizing that that trauma has been encoded into us through centuries of warfare, just warring on each other. And so we have these trigger points, and we have different points. And so by being willing, I suppose first you got to get folks to be willing to do the work. That may be the trick. However, it does appear, according to the polling and according to the New York Times bestsellers list, that books like White Frailty, How to Be an Anti-Racist, that these books are, that they're selling a lot of these books right now. You know, presumably people are reading or at least jumping around in. And so we can, the possibility of having different conversations that are deeper and will, because to your point, Salaam, you know, this is something that's going to be a long haul. And so we have to keep the momentum going, even with baseball and an NBA, short NBA playoff season of 60 games or whatever they're coming up. So, and we have to try and stay safe while we do all that too. As far as the virus is still out there, and it is hitting in LA County. It's killing Latin men, other men of color harder, it appears to be. So we gotta protect each other.
Yeah, here's a cautionary tale, Rev. The cautionary tale is, remember after 9/11, remember what book was flying off the shelf? The Quran.
Oh.
The Holy Quran flew off the shelf, but that was 2001. But you look at the years and our progress report from 2001 to 2020, so we're going back 19, almost 20 years.
Right.
How has our perception of the Arab community fared? The selling of those Qurans flying off the shelf didn't really change much. You know, so like what I'm concerned about is folks like they're buying books and theorizing and book clubbing, a discussion, tea party, that kind of deal, the tea and crumpets, you know, and they have this discussion and then, oh, that was a wonderful book club. Oh, let's do it again. Oh, I'll bring the wine and cheese next week and we'll discuss something else. So it becomes this like this exercise, you know what I'm saying? And like the exercise is not, like it doesn't really like click, you know. It's good that they're doing it. It's like an extracurricular activity. That's the word I'm looking for. Right. You know what I mean? So like,
it's got to be more than a hobby.
Yeah. So like, I mean, it's fine that the books are flying off the shelves. I mean, but the thing about it is there's no shortage of Black scholars out there who know this stuff. There's no shortage of white allied scholars who know this stuff, such as Tim Wise and Mark Cuban, even the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, among others. You know, there's no shortage of the cerebral exercise. There's no shortage of the literary writing exercise. We need the habitual action and exercise, and for that to take shape.
Right. Huh.
And that looks like
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like a moment to moment lesson.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Buying the books is fine. Please buy the books if you feel you need the knowledge. But I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like, it goes beyond that. That's just making you aware. Now you're aware. Now, what actions are you gonna cause yourself to make changes for? I mean, because I've had white people come to me say that, Salam, I don't know what to do. I did a live on this before, probably
Yeah.
a month ago, and they said, well, I don't know what to do. I said, well, do the same things. I mean, like, I'm going to be honest and call it a generalization. But white folks are pretty observant. They know who's coming on, who moves into their neighborhood. They know who moving next door. Have you guys ever looked at the Next Door app?
Mm-hmm.
That's proof
Yeah.
positive
Yeah.
of how
He lives there.
observant white people are. No, I'm just saying. I'm just keeping it 100 with you.
Okay.
So just looking at how observant white people are, and all of a sudden, well, I don't like that dump that's around Pettit Park Library. I'm going to call my city council. I'm going to call the Chamber of Commerce. So you know the steps to do. You
Right.
just need the courage to do them when it pertains and benefits to someone outside of yourself, even if it's to your own debiting of your own advantage that you have over that person whom you're speaking on behalf of.
I saw those posts on the Nextdoor app about on Pettit, and I thought, well, okay, you're complaining about it and saying it was an eyesore is what the ones I saw, and I'm like, why don't you ask where these homeless people can live? Not complain about the eyesore, but maybe have some human compassion for the people who don't have homes and that's where they found a park, and some gratitude that somebody allowed them to park there. I mean, that's why there's so many gathered, because somebody's saying, yeah, it's safe. It's okay for you to be here. And
well, there's also like 20 trailers in the parking lot.
It is. I mean,
I don't know why all their stuff. I was just driving by there yesterday and wondering myself. But they got to put their stuff somewhere.
I mean, like, it's the same energy that they have. What white folks I see by and large who look to preserve their neighborhood, preserve their home value, which I get, but the same energy that they have when they see a Walmart go up, when they see a Home Depot go up, and that mindset, they think, okay, there goes the neighborhood. Who's coming in there? What elements are coming? Okay, right. Like if there's a Vallarta that goes up, okay, now that's a red flag. Okay, who's going to happen now? You got to be paying attention to who's going and coming. I mean, frankly, to be honest, looking at the Nextdoor app, and Danny had hit me to it, but looking at it, frankly, I saw like pretty much soft racial profiling on there, to be honest. Right. There's a 6'7" black guy walking down the street. Yeah. Here he comes, he's turning the corner now. And that creates an Ahmaud Arbery situation.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, somebody, to their credit, the community did call out, because I was aware of that. That happened about 4 or 5 months ago. This was maybe even last year. But somebody called them out on that, and it was just a kid, walking around in the neighborhood doing whatever.
Right.
But it's like that silly thing that happened in Central Park with the bird watching dude. And, But,
super.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see these occurrences happen
we need
more
to have the
and
same
more.
energy and commitment to addressing. Well, I suppose we start with police brutality. I suppose we start there, but that's just the tip of a very big iceberg.
Very much so.
Yeah, and so that's almost the easiest one to address.
The Nextdoor app?
No, the brutality, because you can go to a city council person and you can do this and you can take money away and you can do stuff like that. But what's really needed, and I think this is what we're all kind of speaking to, is there has to be a change of consciousness, the way that we're thinking about this situation, where we stay committed, like every week. Okay, so let's see where we've made forward action on this particular aspect.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I don't know really, I'm not really sure what that is yet. Like, is it, because there's
And that's
so many,
okay.
well, like you were saying, Malayna, there's just so much to do, right? So there's fair housing,
Hmm.
there's equity in the job market, there's how to make sure our schools are integrated in in real ways, and that the curriculum is integrated,
Hmm.
right? So that we learn about W.E.B. Du Bois. So
Hmm.
we learn more about Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, and not just, oh, she did the Underground Railroad, we're going to put her on the $20 bill.
Yeah.
Well, no, there's a lot more to that story, right? And this is what I think you were speaking to also, Salaam, is the idea of, where's my heritage?
Right.
My heritage has been taken from me when
Hmm.
I was pulled from, I don't have that except for the heritage, the family heritage maybe that we've built within our own story here.
Yeah.
But that story has, the migration. You mentioned that when you were at the center that one night, the Great Migration, that
Yes.
has Jim Crow, that has lynching, it has a systemic criminalization of young black men,
Hmm.
starting with Nixon on forward,
It sure did.
and Bill, and making this whole big business out of incarcerating people,
In the name
mostly
of law and
people.
order.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff, and it's all
Hmm.
like you were saying. It's all fear-based stuff.
Hmm.
So this is, to me, this is why I'm saying it's going to be a long haul thing, because the kids need to get together and know that, and just meet, have black friends, have white friends, have um, Latin friends, just whatever, and then find ways to keep those, which is tough to do in a very
Yes.
modern society, but to maintain those friendships through life.
Yes.
Like when I just think for myself, when I've heard, racist stuff or whatever, and I've spoken up, it's because, I picture myself with my buddy Dwayne
Hmm.
standing next to me. Would I allow that if Dwayne was standing here? Well, no.
Right.
Okay. So that means those are the kind of the games that I play, but I have that relationship from my childhood to attach to, and many people just don't.
Right.
That's
And I
true.
would imagine that if you grow up in Chicago,
Hmm.
it's probably, I don't know how the neighborhoods work out there, but you may not have any white friends except maybe in class.
Yep. My neighborhood was 96% black,
Right.
with
So
a median income of 10,000 per year.
nice. Yeah. So all of that,
Poverty at its finest.
right. And in Chicago, which
Yes.
is, that's going to be where the heavy lifting, it's going to be
And
in those neighborhoods. It's going to
hmm.
be at least here in Los Angeles. There is SC is nearby. Uh,
Yes.
UCLA is not far away.
Hmm.
So I don't know, but I think it's easier to integrate here. For one thing, we're not all penned up in our apartments for 6 months a year because it's
Yeah.
too cold out. So
Well, Chicago, like they've mastered segregation. I mean, the whole redlining concept, which gave way to housing discrimination, where they pretty much arbitrarily took a map of the city and they drew lines on it and said, okay, this area is blighted. We're not going to invest in this area. We're going to write policies so the banks don't invest there and insurance can't underwrite any loans there as well. So you take like any kind of equity from the bank funding and insurance underwriting, out of that neighborhood, and so you create situations where where you have this these violence. I mean, like you see the recent reports of shootings, in Chicago, 75 shootings over 4th of July weekend. but a lot of it's a combination of things. There's some things that you have. There's a combination of of character, of bad seeds, just like with anything else. But there's a lot of systemic things because what one thing that doesn't come to mind is every time they run the serial numbers on the firearms that are confiscated that are used in these crimes, those firearms go. The serial numbers are traced out to Skokie, traced in Zion, traced out in these far out white suburbs that Black people don't have the resources to even go through, or would want to take the risk of being caught dead in because of some racist cop they can come across. So it's a dilemma. And it's the same thing, and that's not just exclusive to Blacks. I mean, you had in the founding of this country, and you can see with every time there was a settlement that happened, anytime there was a lack of resources, there was infighting that came about against folks who look like you. I mean, you go to be looking at the 13 colonies and expanding west and establishing like different territories. You had through the South, you had the tobacco fields, you had the cotton fields that were producing resources for the factories in the North. That's how they were making their money. So they would look at you funny if you had ranchers who were driving cattle across the country, if you had farmers who were like wanting to plant crops and things like that, or if you had railroad barons who were looking to build the Union Pacific Railroad straight through across the country, and 500 miles up to the north and 500 miles to the south, all that land was theirs as well. And they granted that to the settlers who were coming right behind them. So you have all these like battles for the same limited resource land, so it was always these battles between the cattle ranchers, between the land barons, the farmers, and the railroad tycoons. That's just anytime you have.
And then you have outside influences. So according to Howard Zinn, after the Civil War, the largest landholder in the United States were the Brits.
Yes.
So absolutely. So you have this whole, and I actually did go into that yesterday, that the white supremacy thing has its roots in this whole British notion of supremacy.
Yes.
And of course, it was true that at one time, the sun did not set on the British Empire, and that was well into the Victorian era.
Yes.
It was Victoria who was called the Empress.
The Empress, yes, she was.
Right. So, that
is a global influence of oppression, because when I lived in Sri Lanka, I could see how the differences in skin color were significant. So they actually, because arranged marriages are still a thing in Sri Lanka, India, they would run classified ads where the parents would run an ad to try to marry off their kid. And in the descriptions, like I have, fair-skinned, educated, and then they talk about what, heritage they came from. But having fair skin was seen to be a big plus. And this has been handed down from when the British were there.
A caste system of sorts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's, I don't know if we can blame the British.
That's how Thurgood Marshall made the case against separate but equal, which is also, I didn't talk about this in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. Separate but equal is in the preamble.
Absolutely.
And so it's interesting how, like you were pointing out, within the 13th Amendment, that there were these little clauses that got exploited. I mean, something as simple as separate but equal, which was talking about separating the colonies from Britain, or separating, the people who lived in the American colonies from King George. And then it becomes this notion then to set up Jim Crow. So anyway, it is a very complex thing. And we've been going at it now for about an hour.
We're not going to solve it right now.
We're not going to solve it. but I tell you, every time I do a July, because I'm an immigrant, so and I love America. I've been to Britain, I've been to Ireland. I love them both, but I also see the effects of the aristocracy,
Mm-hmm.
and the damage that has had, particularly in Ireland. I see, I feel like there's a corporate aristocracy being put in place now.
Yes.
And that's been developed now for the last, certainly the last 60 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
That concerns me. But when I do find it interesting that in this science of mind teaching, when we talk about freedom, and we get to July 4th, and we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're inalienable rights, right? So, and these are the ways that Holmes used to structure his talks also. That, God is self-evident, and it's self-evident that it's our right to be happy and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so to celebrate, even as a little kid, I was very aware to celebrate this holiday, knowing that, because I was a little kid when Dr. King was doing his thing. I was like 10 to, let's see, he was assassinated in 68, right? So I would have been 12 then. So I wasn't an adult, but it was still horrifying, right? And then Bobby got assassinated.
Like 2 months after that.
And it just seemed like it took all the air out of, even as a kid, I had a sense of that. So I'm always cognizant of I don't really want to call them a disclaimer, but I just think it's important, particularly in our movement that is predominantly white, make the point that we of the who inhabit white bodies, that it is up to us to bring the hands of justice, that we are the hands of justice in this matter, and not from saving. The black folk don't need to be saved by us.
Right.
Right. So but just to make sure that we're all up, shoulder to shoulder, hopefully looking the same direction and stepping together into something that we're building together for our kids, so that, Isaiah's son does not have to have the talk with his son. Right. So that's,
how old is Isaiah?
Probably naive.
He's 17.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay.
He's 17.
That's probably overly hopeful, but I think it's a goal that we really need to set.
Yeah.
And
just saying, like, it was you mentioned about the science of mind, and the basic fundamental of science of mind is understanding what you feed the mind is what the mind expands within the mind, basically. So, and the difference is what you look at, it's a predominantly white, dominated the denomination, for lack of a better term, or I'll say a spiritual path. That's a better choice of words. Sure. But black people, by and large, we're all over the place, but a lot of us have a foundation in Christianity, because that's what raised us. So that goes back generations. But within that kind of upbringing, you're taught to this I guess these demagoguery, if you will, of like, we have pictures of white Jesus. I use that as an example. So there's not a black person well, my kid's probably one of the few exceptions now, but many of us in our age group, there's not a black person roaming this earth that didn't see that coming up, in their household. It was very prevalent.
You got one of the three wise men, and that was about it.
Yeah, you know,
Everybody else was white.
and then when you
Get
went to
Balthazar.
church, that's what you saw. You know what
Right.
I mean. But
Exactly.
what I see with the science of mind is there is no like a hierarchical order per se. So that you're not like spiritually reporting to someone, right? You're reporting to
In
your
theory, yes.
mind. Yeah, in theory, but not. Of course, your title, spiritual director,
Yeah.
right? But that notwithstanding, but I'm speaking just on the text itself, just on the
Yeah.
pathway itself. Like you're really answering to your own divinity, call of divinity in here, and so it gives you a little bit of freedom to explore that. Where it is not controlled by a dogma. But on the other side of things, Christianity, as it was fed to us fresh off the plantation, it was controlled by dogma. And we were prohibited from learning certain parts of the Bible. We were prohibited, our reverends and preachers were prevented from teaching certain parts of the Bible, such as Malcolm X's dad. Like in the South, if if you taught certain aspects of the Bible that were empowering, you could be lynched.
Right. That's
And
the
even if
whole
you
book of
weren't in the
Exodus.
spiritual path, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like it's just like you see those are the kind of when you're dealing
Well,
with like a different schools of spiritual thought, per se.
right.
You look at like where those spiritual thoughts derive from and the mechanisms that create them. Then you kind of see like the differences of why the okay, science of mind, yes, it's predominantly it is white. That's a fact. But Christianity is, I don't know if it's predominantly black. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. It's probably worth some research. But a lot of us, more often than not, had a Christian oriented upbringing.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so that's going to shape you, even if you are not aware of it on a conscious level, on a subconscious, is shaping you. And it's a lot of relearning that personally I had to do when it came to discovering myself and finding the path of Islam that will give me something, give me some food, spiritual food that I can nourish my soul on and
Right.
kind of grow into. So it's words. I mean, I've been doing it since on that discovery phase on my own, self-directed, since I was 15. And here I am about to be 45. So there's that.
Just a kid, Salaam.
Yeah.
Just a kid. And you can still play basketball, so
Yeah, I
that's
can.
impressive. So I just want to make sure we stay within a time frame here.
Sure.
Yeah, it feels like a good stopping point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Okay.
I so appreciate your being willing to do this with us. I love that
You're
you have
welcome.
message to the black man. Is that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad?
Elijah Muhammad.
And you got Ali up there.
This book started my transformation. Without this book, you wouldn't even know me as I am and how I am.
Right.
So I owe a debt of gratitude here. So,
Right.
yeah.
I see on your bookshelf, it looks like a Jan Le Van Zandt kind of, right?
Absolutely. It's a whole, let's see, what's behind me here? Right here. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
there she is.
yeah. And here's right next to it, it's a book on Swamini Turiya Sangeetananda, also known as Alice Coltrane, written by my mother-in-law.
Cool.
Yes, nice. Yeah, I know you have a strong connection with that community going back years.
Yes.
Yeah. So
anyway, you are a wealth
to know you and
you're a wealth of knowledge and information, Salaam. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to get to listen to what you're sharing and have these conversations with you and share it with others. So
thank you.
I'm gonna have to come by and at least come by and stand at your driveway and say hello and
absolutely
everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So for anybody watching, thanks for joining us on Thoughts on Talks. Thanks to Salaam Thompson, Reverend Mike McMorrow, I'm Malayna Dawn, and keep tuning in and checking the Center for Spiritual Living in Granada Hills to see what comes next as we unfold with it, because we don't know what comes next.
To
Oh,
be
by the way, I
continued.
did send you the right PowerPoint, so you have it now.
Well, that's timely. Thanks. I'll look at that later. But people can watch yesterday's Sunday talk, the July 5th Sunday talk, if they want to see the right slideshow.
Yeah.
They just got a
Okay.
bonus of a different slide today.
All right.
All right, so thanks.
See you.
See you.
Dinner time.
Thank you
I'll
both.
stop recording, right?
Yep, here are you gonna do it or do you want me to?